Welcome. I'm Jamie Tyler, your energy esthetician, and this is the Love Aligned podcast. Today I'm going to be talking about generational trauma. I have had a lot of clients ask me about generational trauma. Does it exist? Is it real? And yes, it exists, and yes, it's real. A lot of people always assume that trauma is always passed down, but did you know that there are also many positive ways and things that are passed down as well? But today we will go over the trauma, what it is and how we can heal from it. I won't go into details about generational trauma, like every little detail, every way we can handle it, things like that, because that could get into something pretty big and we could be here for hours. So, but there are positive things that we can have too with generational. So it can be passed down. So positive things that can be passed down in families are sense of humor, traditions, cherished memories, and more. But we can also inherit emotional damage. And that is what is called generational trauma. So generational trauma, also called intergenerational trauma, is an emotional wound that extends from one generation to the next. So its effects can be seen in individuals, families, and entire communities. And the cycle of inherited trauma often repeats itself. So with this, we can see this a lot, honestly, in different types of families. We can see this in, it replicates itself in African Americans, in Native Americans, and we can really see it, but a lot of people don't understand it because they say, we didn't do this to you, just let it go, right? That's not really how it works. I mean, this is something that is really traumatizing. They've heard stories their whole life, or, these things have been passed down to them. And there's not just stories they've heard. These are in history books. This is trauma. It's real. And until they heal from it, and how do they heal from it if we can't help them heal as well, right? By stopping what we say. But also, by stopping what we say, I mean, we kind of have to be understanding of it as well. But this is a true, real thing. This is generational trauma or intergenerational trauma. It is something that is a cycle of inherited trauma, and it does repeat itself. So it is a series of events and behaviors that are related to events that happened many years ago to someone in your family that they then replicate. They talk about or share in some way with their descendants. But you can break the cycle so it doesn't keep repeating itself. Okay? So what is generational trauma? It's any traumatic event that causes deep distress can be passed on. So generational trauma is a traumatic event that can cause deep distress and be passed on. So we keep passing this on, hence why it's called generational trauma. We keep passing it on and on and on, and so do other families, right? So we just need to break the cycle. We need to stop passing it on. We need to heal from it. But now you may be asking yourself, how does this show up in families? Generational trauma can affect a wide variety of families and show up in ways that you might not even think of, such as a family might seem emotionally numb or have strong hesitancies about discussing feelings. A family might see discussing feelings as a sign of weakness, right? Another family might have trust issues with outsiders and seem continually have conflict basically with people. Some families might seem anxious and overly protective of their children or family members, even when there's no threat or danger. Okay? So these are ways that this can show up. This, however, by no means is a comprehensive list. I just want you to know of examples of how trauma affects multiple generations. It can also show up in unhealthy relationship boundaries and families subconsciously, learning unhealthy survival behaviors. For instance, a parent may be unable to offer emotional support if their child is sexually assaulted because they haven't processed their own experience with abuse. Or a grandparent that refuses to face their scarring experience fighting in a war, right, may in turn teach their grandchildren to dismiss and minimize their emotional hardships. But also, when we think about history, okay, there are many groups that come to mind that have been affected by generational trauma. And this is what I was talking about earlier, such as like descendants of the United States enslavement, Native Americans, refugees, those that have experienced substance misuse across generations, okay, those who have survived childhood abuse or neglect, family members of like Holocaust survivors, just to name a few. These people have had trauma generationally. They have heard stories. They carry this trauma and they need to heal from it. But how can you heal from something when people keep throwing it in your face? Just do it. Just heal from it. I mean, I hear it all over social media. I hear it all the time. People are rude. People don't, they're not understanding of it. I think they really don't think or feel that this is something that happens or understand that it can happen. But it is something that is carried through generation to generation to generation. And there's things in your family that probably does as well that you may not understand or that someone else may not understand. And so we really just need to come together and realize we all carry some type of trauma generationally, and we just need to understand each other, or just at least heal our own and worry about our own, if that makes sense. But another key component of generational trauma is vicarious distress. So trauma is not just about a traumatic event, but our response to the event, if that makes sense. So it's the idea that I can be a witness to something, right? And it impacts me as if I was that person that it was happening to. So as a result, it is common for these groups to feel fear and fear the world. People can say what they will and say, well, it's not like that now, get over it or whatever, okay? However, the people who do this or say this are not coming from understanding or love, but this is real and it's part of our DNA, hence the name generational trauma. It's passed down and will continue to do so until it is healed. Breaking the cycle of inherited damage can help you heal from generational trauma. Many people don't recognize their behaviors as, say, maladaptive because they simply are taking what they've learned and applying it in the best way that they know how. Okay? So awareness is the key to change. Without recognizing that there is something happening in your family system, there can't be change, right? So I'm going to tell you some steps. So the first step basically is seeing the patterns, okay? Some are more obvious than others, of course. So like domestic violence, abuse, anxiety, gender roles, among others. Then the second step would be, is building like awareness around what triggers you to step into these established patterns. Like, is it disrespect? Like, is it yelling? Feeling devalued? Physical aggression? Is it watching other people bully others? This list could be endless as far as the second step, okay? Once you are aware of these triggers, the fourth step is becoming aware of how you react to the triggers. Do you shut down? Do you become angry? Do you yell? Do you become violent? Like, how are you I guess once you're aware, like, how are you reacting to it? And then the fourth step is like learning to put roadblocks in those patterns. So setting up a trigger word or a phrase that may help you recognize when you're going down this pattern. Setting up like a support network to be held accountable. A fifth step is giving yourself grace. This is so important. These patterns that have been ingrained for like a huge period of time, a long period of time. Generational trauma does not heal overnight, or even over a week. It does take a long time. I mean, your whole life, this is something that you've dealt with, right? So you've got to give it time. You've got to give yourself grace. And just be kind to yourself, especially when you are trying to heal it. If you are a parent, in addition to opening up communication with your children, or even if you have grandchildren, so your grandchildren, about your experiences, it's also important to work through generational trauma themselves. Trauma survivors can either keep repeating this cycle or generate a solution by creating a new narrative. This happens like when family members speak up and work through hurt, pain, or abuse from the past, okay? So children need to believe that they are safe and cared for by trusted adults. So when core beliefs, say, are muddled by their parents, like mistrust, doubt, or resentment, maybe insecurity, children learn to view the world from this perspective. So this hinders their ability to form secure and trusting relationships and develop a healthy sense of self-worth. So let's go over some tips on how to break a cycle. And like I said, this is just some ways to break this cycle. Like I said, we could do this all day long, but I'm just going to go over some ways to do this. Open up a conversation with your parents about their life experiences and how they coped. Notice any embedded patterns, attitudes, narratives from your family that you continue to portray. Talk through these areas with a trusted friend or family member, or consider an alternative way of coping or communicating, a therapist or whoever. Cultivate a sense of empathy, as well as compassion for your family and the struggles they endured. Despite their flaws, many of our ancestors worked hard so that we could have a better life. So we do have to remember that. So this too should be celebrated and embraced. Recreate a new narrative that you want your children to embody and believe about their family and themselves and the world. And it's okay to do that. Some people are like, well, that's not what it is. Well, it is. You can recreate it. You're changing it. You don't want them to keep following the same mistakes or whatever was happening generationally to carry that trauma. And here's ways that you can at least help yourself at least start the process is naming your trauma. Vocalize your trauma. It actually is powerful, and it's a first step to healing. Sometimes you have to name it to yourself because the people you love aren't ready to hear it, or they're not ready to heal from it. Acknowledging that you have experienced any type of trauma, whether it's generational or not, can then help you process the emotions associated with it. And then you need to claim it. Claim your trauma. You don't have to accept or make peace with it, but denying it makes it like it never happened. And we know all of our trauma generationally, whether it was generational or not, has happened. So you don't have to embrace it, but you have to recognize that it existed and then do something about it. And then always practice self-care. Doing something about it can start with like tackling your emotional well-being by engaging in self-care practices that resonate with you. So sometimes that can be like exercise or, finding nutritious foods, reading, meditation, whatever that is for you. And then when going through any type of healing at all, whether it's generational trauma healing or just any type of healing, remember the ability to feel safe is probably the most important aspect. When we grow up with family dynamics that make us feel unsafe, unvalidated in our feelings and experiences, we can struggle to move past our personal and family trauma. So let's break the cycle and heal. And in return, we will heal generations. How beautiful is that? They do say, and they have been saying for the last few years, that when we heal our generational trauma, it heals 7 generations back and 7 generations forward. That is the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. Do I know if that's a fact? Absolutely not. But I love the way that it sounds, knowing that we can help heal generationally and have it keep going. I think it's amazing. And I have been on this path of trying to help heal generationally, even just starting with my little family right now and my children, and I know that there have been stories and things like that. And just starting with one thing, one change has made the hugest difference. And I promise you, it makes the hugest difference, just the littlest thing. So keep doing what you're doing. Don't be afraid of the change, and help others see how beautiful it is, and keep going. Because like I said, when we heal, and we can heal generationally, it's beautiful and it's amazing. You guys keep healing. I love that I am able to do this for you. And I'm excited to keep continuing to help, at least with my opinions on these things and these matters. But I appreciate you joining me. So thanks again for joining your energy esthetician on the Love Aligned podcast. Tune in for next week's show. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Love Aligned Podcast. Click on the link in my bio, like, subscribe, comment, and ring that bell. You can also private message me if you need a remote or in-person healing. You can email me at lovealignedpodcast@gmail.com for questions as well. Have a beautiful day and happy healing.